if everybody will come on in, we'll get started. That'd be great. All right, I'm sure everybody knows me by now, so there's no sense going into a big long introduction. It's really been great being here. This is our third and final session. Really glad to travel around and see different atmospheres and different climates and different situations. It's really been a lot of fun to be a part of the conference here. Really appreciate the invitation up. So this session we're going to talk about improving water infiltration into cover crops and what that done for me. I touched on that in my first talk. This will show a little bit more in depth. This is going to be really interactive as well, so it's not going to all be slides and Jimmy talking, which sometimes is good and which sometimes is bad, but we'll go with that. You know, Henry Ford once said if I'd asked people what they wanted, they would said a faster horse. You know, you really got to think about that, because at that time, that's what everybody was focused on, was horses and plowing. They weren't thinking the bigger picture or another picture. And so that's what we have to do, is we got to disrupt and we got to innovate and try something in environments that, you know, some people say you can't do it. So at Emmons Farms, it was a new day after I talked to David Brandt. And I was really energized with what David said. And one thing about David is never wavered. He's been a great friend from the start to the end. This here was our first cover crop in 2011. Very, very, very dry summer. We had harvested wheat. We planted this. I think this was my original seven or eight way mix. But what we done, we kept a bare spot, a bare square that you're looking at there. I'm standing taking this picture probably on just right on the forefront of the other side. So it wasn't a big square, but it was a good check. What we done, and that's my conservation district secretary, Colita, standing there by the water probe, moisture probe. We've got our probe right where the flag is, there behind me. It's also a temperature probe, and then behind Colita, the same distance, we've got another one out in the cover crop. So that whole summer we measured our water, if it rained, and it did rain once, and you can see the cover crop's really stressed out there, but we watched temperature. That was a real game changer, because at times we saw temperatures 130 degrees in this square, and we never saw temperatures over 100, even in that short burning up cover crop. Most of the time it was 85 to 90. There were some thin spots around, and once in a while you could find a spot that would do that. And so what we're trying to do here is simulate, this is what my neighbors would have done, and what I used to do all the time too. We wanted it bare, we didn't want any weeds. That was our summer program until we went back to wheat. And in that time, in wheat country, it was wheat, farmed it all summer, and you went to wheat in September. So we'd harvest in June, go back in September and plant. So this is what we were trying to look at. Anybody see that square? That's the bare square, the following wheat crop. This was in the spring. Once again, we're still in the big drought of 2011 and 12. So this is in the spring of 12 now. And Jim Johnson with Noble Research Institute, there's guys back to us. He said, wonder if we can find that square from last summer when he come out to see me. And I done knew it. And I said, well, I don't know, Jim, let's see if we can go find it. And he's like, oh my gosh, Jimmy, what's going on here? And I said, like, you're from the Research Institute. That's the reason you're here. Help me figure this out. Now, we done knew that by tracking moisture, that it was moisture deficit in that square. I done knew that. I'll tell you that right up front. I didn't tell him how much. I didn't tell him any of that. So what he done, he went and got his soil test probe out of the pickup and come back, and he started probing in that square. As he probed in that square, he could only get in about 16 inches, and it was just like hard as this deck. And he said, well, you got a hard pan, a plow pan? I said, no, Jim, I don't. I know this soil. So he moved out around the square, and everywhere around that square, he could push it all the way into the T-handle. And it just blew him away. And so he said, call your soil scientist right now and have him bring a Giddings probe out. They brought a Giddings probe out, and it was amazing what we found. And I'm going to share that with you as we go here. This was the soil moisture where we started, and we monitored it all for a longer period than this, but I couldn't get it all. It got so small I didn't do that. Anybody have an idea of what that little dog leg is out here? Where it ticked back up? Yeah, it's half-inch rainfall event. But you see, it's still separated. We evaporated enough water out of that square, even though we caught some water, we were still the same deficit. Kind of important. Then the temperature, and like I said, there's wider swings than this later on, but in this particular situation, we were about 15 to 20 degrees different swings in there as that cover crop progressed out. Very important if you're watching evaporation. This is the graph I showed y'all yesterday. This is what happened when we pulled them Giddings probes out. They took them back to the lab. They weighed them. They put them in the oven, dried them out, and then reweighed them. And that was the difference. There was 4.6 inches where we had no cover and 7.2 where we had cover. What happened, we evaporated so much water out the summer before, and we destroyed that soil structure on top. And a lot of that, people say, well, you buried that off, and then we had the field day and we trampled around on it. Well, yeah, but we trampled around in the cover crop all around beside it as well. And you can find lots of excuses to think things won't work. Then I showed this to you yesterday as well. And this was just the opposite of what we were thinking. But once again, we went to grazing, and on September 30th, we were behind where we had cover crops. But that summer, I took $150 worth of beef off that cover crop. So I didn't mind using a little dab of water. But look what happened when we pulled them probes in February. We caught some snow, and we caught a little rain. And now we're actually a little bit of water ahead. And that's when it really changed my entire thought process of fixing soil structure and what cover crops do. And like I said the other day, if you were afraid you weren't going to get any rain, you could go ahead and not graze that and terminate that. But I also like the animals, and I like capturing another $150. And I normally we'll get some snow and rain through the winter months. And so I kind of hedged my bet a little bit and took the money. But in the end, when I really needed the water, I had the water to finish. So, that was just one window snapshot. Once again, we still, every time we do this, and we measure a lot, in the end, if we get the rain, we're ahead where we got good covers. If it doesn't ever rain, it really doesn't matter. I want to be truthful with you. We all know that. And if you're in a big drought and it never rains to replenish that, that's just the way it's going to be. But it's going to be that way whether you had covers or not. So you got to think about that a little bit. This was part of the game-changing event. I only have 2 sprinklers on my operation. So we've got 220-acre pivots along the South Canadian River. The problem is my water's really salty. I'm in an atrium deposit along the river. The river's kind of salty anyhow, and the water's really hard, so we have to watch how much water we put on. We have plenty of water, and I'm not restricted. I got two acre feet's what I got. So I would have plenty of water to do what I needed to do, but it's too salty. And so what we do, once we figured that out, and that took me a while, I about screwed my pH up in my soil, and because the water pH is about 8.6, 8.7, and so you got to watch that. And I about screwed the soil up before I figured that out. And once I did that, what we've done here, a big rain front was coming in, and it is one time the weatherman was right. He's the only profession you can be wrong all the time and still have a job. But so I was putting on 2 inches with the pivot, and we actually got a 4-inch rain. And I went down there the next morning to shut the pivot off. And as you can see here, and this was kind of like I described in the original presentation, it just blew me away that I fixed the soil so good now that, I took 6 inches here, and it doesn't even look like I've irrigated behind the pivot, and it's coming towards me there. And so that really started changing things, and the reason I was irrigating in front of that rain was to use the rainwater to dilute the salt and push the salt on down and still fill my profile with moisture up. And we do that a lot if we see that we're going to get a big rain, and we only use irrigation now as a supplement on these dry times. But I still got to watch, because that it's like being a tillage addict. I still want to go out there and pump water on, and we're treat the water with a product now that's helped that, and I can actually reduce the pH to the water to about a 6.4 to 6.8 is what I like, and it's got a lot better. Still, this soil pit was the one that really opened my eyes up how the water really infiltrated where it run into the pit. And I've done that in my own pit. And right here, this pit we dug for the Australian. You have to excuse the poor quality. It'll get better here in just a minute. I shot it with my phone. I was pretty excited. You see some of the structure. This was early on, wasn't the best. The other day we had a huge rain. As you can see, very muddy down in here. But really what happened is, look at all the earthworm activity. There's just hundreds. What happened, see that black water was running out of these earthworm holes into the pit. See the dark carbon soil as it come out? It's just amazing to look here at what we're seeing. Some of the first videos were that came out, so it wasn't the best. Right here. But the carbon was just running out of their earthworm burrows that had been storing. You see multiples here, but then as we scroll around, I broke this root off by accident. This is soybean plant. That root went right on down below that, and that's about 2.5 feet into the ground. And look, you just see all the water was infiltrating down through the soil. When it rained, it did not run over in from the top. It came out all these earthworm holes. This is down about 3 foot, 4 foot. Here's some more examples. So this pit had been open. One of the most amazing things, I wished I could have been here when it was raining. All the water come out. And yet, we still have lots of mycorrhizal fungi. Which was not right. Jill talked about this morning. Really done well. So here's the next thing that we done. We started measuring water infiltration. This is a mini disc infiltrometer. Jim Johnson's with us, helping us. wind's blowing there a little bit. So it's got a little head on it that helps push that in the ground.
It's pretty consistent at 1 to 1.5 per minute.
It's a slow process, but what do you do in the wintertime? You know, sit on the ground, warm clothes, and watch paint dry almost. But it really helped us understand what we were doing and how our soil was changing. So back to the pit, I had dug that pit in the soybean field for the Australians that were coming. We had a whole busload coming, and I didn't get around to covering it back up, and then we had that big rainfall event. And I thought, well, let's go down and see, what it looked like. And said, poor quality. I wished I'd done it differently that day, but I was kind of excited. And it just showed the pin cushion of what's below the ground and how that facilitation of all that activity and how that helps the water cycle and how we can move water down very quickly in the profile.
So our first inch took 2 minutes and 2 seconds.
Let me
We're on our so our first inch took 2 minutes and 2 seconds.
So 2 minutes and 2 seconds for
We're
the
on our
first
second
inch.
inch of water now, and we're right around 20 minutes. So that means we could easily take a 2-inch rain that occurred in a half an hour. And while those events are rare, they do occur. Those extreme 2-inch per half an hour, 4-inch per hour rainfall events, 3-inch per hour rainfall events, and this soil would take that all in rather than letting it run off.
And that would go to refilling the aquifer, refilling the profile, and not contaminating stream water with nutrients and loading downstream.
Yeah, absolutely. It has a lot of effects for the downstream watershed, as well as for the next crop that's going to grow here.
All right, very good, Jim. So they really helped me understand. And by the way, this disc here are rings that we use. Jim really likes these double rings. And he's actually got a deal rigged up on the hitch of his pickup. It's got a hydraulic jack on it. Instead of hammering these in, we really like just to press them in. Because if you can press them in, you don't do any disturbance. If it's real dry, like it was out to the dairy the other day, we're really hammering on them rings, you get to fracturing that soil, and especially if you use a small ring. And you'll actually distort some of them infiltration numbers if you don't watch it. You don't get a good seal around it. So Jim likes this, but we were using this in conjunction with the mini disc as well. So we had, at the same time, we would do this while the mini disc was running. We've used some of the new NRCS electronic probes. They've come out with them this last year. They brought them out and set them up. This was probably about, this video work here was probably 4 years ago now. 4 or 5 years ago. So our water infiltration rates has really improved since that time. It just continues to get better and better as we build that structure, and it gets better. And it's been a really changing event. These are some soybeans, and this is not my soybeans. This is some from my travels in Tennessee. Adam Doherty, like I said, yesterday, has really changed his entire county down there in the amount of covers they grow. And they call this the little Iowa, in this particular farm, they call it Eden, because it really is. And them was absolutely the best soybeans I've ever been in. Sometimes, when soybeans are this big, it's just all vine, all plant, no pods. These were well over 100 bushel beans. And it just unbelievable. And so what I done, we took this picture, and then I wanted to try to show why they're that good. And so I pulled the beans back, and I looked down in the canopy, and they had rolled down cereal rye that was about 6'6", 6'8". after they planted through it, and then they rolled that down. So it had this tremendous amount of residue on the ground. That's critical, first of all, in the summertime to keep the temperatures down, keep that biological community fed, but also to keep the temperature down. And then if you get a big rain, and they have bigger rainfall, they're in a 50-inch rainfall, if you can believe it or not, in that area. And so I got the ProScope out. I talked about that on my phone, and I looked at the surface. I pulled all that residue back gently with my fingers, and I looked at the surface. This is my naked eye. This is just how it looked. And I tell everybody that you know, Ray Charles can tell you where the water's going to go here. You know, that aggregation, and that is as good as it gets, folks. I mean, you'll look a lot of soils across this country before you'll see something this good. And so then I took my scope, and I zoomed in on the surface, and look at them aggregates and look at them pores in that soil. And that's what I shot for, and that's the reason I came home, and that's what I wanted to build at home. And we've done a pretty good job with that. And that just goes to show you, when you get a rainfall event or you're irrigating, how we can get that water in at them rates, I'm telling you, because it's just a huge honeycomb. And it's got excellent gas flow. And that's one thing, and Jill talked about this a little bit this morning, and others have as well. The biology is just like us. They breathe in oxygen, they breathe out water vapor and CO2. And if you don't have that airflow, and them gaps and them pores in there, they can't breathe in oxygen, and then they can't get rid of their CO2. And so, you know what you do to the population if you can't breathe oxygen in, you can't get rid of CO2. And so that's what happens. So that's the reason gas flow is very, very important to this, besides the infiltration rate.
Can I ask you a dumb question?
There is no dumb question.
Well, might be, what's a roller?
A roller crimper.
Well, yeah, what does the machine look like?
So it's a big pipe that has blades on it made in a chevron pattern, so that you roll that right over and you crimp it and you'll terminate it. We call it a roller crimper. It just rolls, got big bearings on it, and you can just roll that down and make a mat. Now, I was asked at dinner, you know, when do you use a roller? I use it on every summer crop I have. So if I got cereal rye, I'm going to roll crimp it down. In the wintertime, in that where I'm planting cereals into them warm seasons, I want to leave them standing. Because at home right now, the wife just sent me some pictures a while ago. We're getting some snow. It's not going to be a big snow, 1 to 3 inches, but the wind's blowing 40 and 50 mile an hour. And so we want to keep that in the field, and so we keep that residue sticking up for them snow events like that. So I don't roll in the fall, only in the spring. So you need to look them up. That's a good tool for termination, get you away from chemicals and stuff to do that. And it's harder than multi-species to roll crimp because you got different stages. That rye and them cereals need to be in flowering stage to get a real good termination on that. If you roll it too quick, it's just going to stand back up because they're pretty durable. So it's a narrow window opportunity. This particular photograph here is about 50 feet out of that field into the neighbor's field. There was no fence. They in Tennessee, their boundaries are trees or points. And so they don't have a fence line there to keep the neighbors. You just look down at that trees, and that big oak tree down there, this is the boundary. No cover crops. Now, these beans were really good. They were about this tall, about pocket high on me. Wasn't as thick, but if you look on the surface here, there's no residue to speak of, and there's weeds coming. And the canopy hasn't closed up yet. There is some algae around there, and Jill talked about that, which is a good thing. But man, look at the weed pressure coming, and look at the surface. Now, up here in the top left corner is where I'm going to take the next shot. That's what the surface looks like in this field with no cover crops. So once again, tell me where the water's going to go if we get a big rainfall, if we're going to irrigate that. Either way, with a surface seal like that, we're going to get a lot of runoff. And that's where poor aggregation and what a cover crop can do for you. And so then I took my pro scope and I zoomed in on that, and that's not the moon. Trust me, it's the same thing. And once again, I think Ray Charles would tell you if you spilt some water on that, it's going to pond up or it's going to run off. It can't go in. And this was another aha moment for me on the farm, what we were doing and what we wanted to do. And Adam continues to grow down there and is really doing great work. So we dug up both them soils. The one on the left is from the cover crop field. One on the right, you see the algae on top there. If you look at that structure, but look at the root mass, that's difference there. So not only are we have a big root mass to grow a good crop, but when we're done with that, as them deteriorate, that's another water pathway, that's another earthworm burrow, that's another airflow. And then the next crop, and that's the reason no-till kind of works really good, is you drill that, least resistance is where the roots are going to go. And so if you provide that for them, they're going to go right down through there where it's easiest. If you look over there on the right, it's not near as carbon rich. There's very little roots that you see in there because the beans, once again, if you listen to Jill a while ago, they just went straight down. They didn't go out very much. And so very, very tough ground, a lot of difference. Once again, I came home. This is what we've been able to build on the left, the neighbor's soil on the right. So we always plant behind the combine. I'm going to get me a stripper header for long. After the wildfire, I couldn't buy the equipment that I really wanted, so we've been kind of saving up. But no matter, and it's dry here, you can see the dust behind the rig, but I've got enough moisture to get it up, and we've really got to get it in right behind the combine if we're going to have success. We've got good residue down on the ground. You know, we're not going to have a lot of evaporation, but that top, we like to plant about 1.5 to 2 inches deep. So that once you open that up, even with just a little slice like we're doing there, we'll start getting evaporation and I'll start drying out. So we got to have that in and get that germinated and get it up. And this is the mix that we were planting. Now yesterday I talked a little bit about this and how we try to manage the low story and the medium story and the tall stuff, the Egyptian wheat in there. You can see a sun hemp plant here in the foreground. There's beans and peas down in there. The millet's on down just a little bit because a lot of my millets are short millets, and that's what I want down there to keep that surface really, really cool. Once again, this is some of the polywire we put up, trying to move things around, actually trying to sprinkle on us that day, which was a really good blessing. This is what I really, really enjoy, is getting out there, moving the cattle around, and just listening. You can hear them stripping them leaves off. It's really peaceful to do that. One of the better things that I enjoy doing when I'm home. We're finishing these calves to go to butcher on these cover crops, so we're moving them in a daily move there, and maybe twice a day. This is back to that Russ Jackson photo without the data. This shows that the brown there on the left, he's been doing a good job for about 4 years there. The neighbor was just really hasn't figured it out. Then there was the data that I shared with you, the first presentation. 144,000 gallons versus 16,000 gallons. That's what it's all about when we're challenged for water. And I realize, I was visiting with some of you around in the break times, that you may not get the rainfall events that we get in these big thunderstorms. But it doesn't matter, even if you're irrigating, if you could put on more water and it'd all go in instead of running off, it's still really important. 2 weeks later, you see the cover crop had greened up. After that rainfall event, it rained again. Just dramatic pictures. You see just a little bit of water puddling right over here on the left is the only parts that I could find, and I'm not for sure by looking at the road that some of the bar ditch hadn't ran over there, but it didn't go anywhere. It just puddled right there a little bit. From the next morning when I went down, that ground now, he's got to till that when it gets dry to bust that crust. If he gets another shower, it'll all run off because it is sealed over right there, and he's locked in a vicious, never-ending pattern, and you can see the silt leaving. Russ had grazed this. This is some sun hemp and legumes that had survived. He'd done a big trample, but he's going to cotton the next spring. And so as long as he didn't really want to kill them, because he wants that legume to do its job and create as much nitrogen as he can. And he made a really, really good cotton crop there. And I'm going to kind of quit there because I really like the interaction and the questions. I think that's how we all learn. I tell everybody that I come to these conferences to learn just like you guys and gals do. It's all about sharing and seeing what's going on here. That's the reason I wanted to come to the field day and actually go out in the field and dig and look and find some earthworms and be a part of that, so I can understand the context and understand the weather here and how everybody operates. The best of my knowledge kind of gives me another perspective as I'm talking. So with that, let's take some questions. Let's have a good conversation for a little while in the back. So at home, we've got a really good mesonet site all across Oklahoma. We have one in every county. In our environment, and I measured that on our farms as well, but anywhere from ½ inch to 1 inch a day in evaporation at home in July and August is very easily done. Single pass of tillage, Dwayne Beck and several others have measured that at ½ inch a pass. And also when his vertical tillage research he done up there, every pass that would reduce your infiltration rates by 50%. So, and there's all sorts of numbers out there that verifies what I'm saying. And that was my mentality to start with, was the cover crops are going to use too much water. And like I said yesterday, that's what my neighbors were saying, and they were right, because we weren't taking the water in. We were running the water out of the field, and until I got that cycle started fixing and started getting that, and now basically I get enough to do what I need to do. There's challenges, like right now, we're as dry as you guys are, maybe a little bit drier even. And cereal grains look like they're going to die. And I hope this snow and stuff will kind of revive them up there. But everybody's in the same boat. The tillage guys, their wheat looks horrible too. It's dying as well. So I think the cover crops really provide us a great opportunity to fix that structure and to take that irrigation water in, or that rainfall or that snow in, and then we have more water to work with. I think that's where that I missed it for all the years. I didn't understand that sequence, and now I do. So I think I think you need to try it on some small acreage and blocks like we was talking in the break there, and just do side-by-side comparisons, and you'll start seeing that change pretty rapidly. Yeah. Next. Yeah.
How did you build the market for your additional crops you're growing, sesame and some of those? How did you come across that market?
So I started growing cover crop seed as the demand started growing it, and we see that demand going up 20-30% a year right now. And so there's lots of opportunity with seed companies to grow different things. The sesame, actually, Sesco called me and wanted someone to grow some regenerative grown sesame. And I was like, okay, how much is sesame? Well, I think at that time it was probably 35 or 38 cents a pound. This year it's 55 cents. And I done a quick math. I said, well, what do you think I can make? Well, somewhere between 800 and 1,000 pounds. I'm like, wow. And it's a desert plant and it doesn't take much water. I think I'll try that. And I did, and it's really been a really good rotation for us. Cowpeas, I was having a field day, and Keith Burns with Green Cover Seed came down, and he said, I was showing him the cover crops, and Keith said, what are you going to do with them cowpeas? And I said, well, that's just kind of an experiment in cover crops. I had a couple 100 acres, and he said, you ever thought about harvesting them? No. Would you want to harvest them? I don't know. Tell me what they're worth. And he told me once again, and we made 1,100 pounds. And so I took in about almost $400 an acre that summer in cash. So that's how I kind of got started, just by accident. And then the markets continue to come, the better you get. And, probably traveling around talking doesn't hurt that either. But it's also a network across the country in these peer groups that I'm in. I mean, it's just getting out and looking. I was in western Kansas in a small area called Kismet, Kansas, and we were talking about this same thing in the field. Where do you find your markets? The only markets we have is for our corn and beans is at town at the elevator, or we got to ship it via truck clear to the port, which is hundreds and hundreds of miles. And I turned around, right behind me, the largest dairy in the world was going in. It's like 600 acres under one roof. And I said, what about right there? What? I said, well, you do know that they can use canola, they can use alfalfa, they can use corn silage. And I just started listing off all the names of the feeds that they could use there. And like, wow, hadn't even thought of that. And so sometimes in markets are right in front of us, and we're just not thinking. It's not easy, but it's not hard either. If you got a good product and you can tell a story. So just start looking around and see what you can grow, what your window is, and find you some plants, and then start looking for a market before you even plant. And you'll be surprised, I think. And things have changed quite a bit. The cover crop seed business is really, really going to be a lucrative market here for a while, I believe, especially if we continue the growth that we're at. And that's any seed company you look at, they're up 10 to 30% every year. And actually, if we would, with the present administration here, if they throw out the dollars that they're talking about and we get wide adoption, there's not going to be enough cover crop seed for everybody. So I think that's a real opportunity for us. Yeah.
So you bought like a 20-inch spacing zone. Hit it about 8 times. You said you're putting in some summer cover crops. Our dialect is there's not even options for that.
Right. Well,
What would you suggest those guys do to try to keep a living good?
once again, if you're relying on dry land or irrigation, and if you don't have the irrigation water, like I said earlier, if it doesn't rain or you can't irrigate, sometimes it doesn't matter. That's the challenge in these arid environments. You just got to look at when that's coming, and if you have a window, then plant something and plant something for the window that you have left. So say like it doesn't shower here, or you don't get an allotment of water till August or late July or something. And, I'm just saying windows. Look at, see what you can grow in 30 or 40 days, or what's your next, just things you got to try to figure out. And I don't have all the magic answers to that. Our rainfall used to be pretty predictable in western Oklahoma. We knew in the last of August, between then and our state fair is normally around the 20th of September. If it didn't rain during the state fair, we were in trouble. And we've been in trouble the last 2 or 3 years. That rainfall is turned on the clock. And we used to never get much in the spring or early summer. If it was going to, while we were harvesting wheat, that's when we were going to get showers, when you was trying to get things out. And that's when we started really trying to plant some of them summer covers and summer crops, is when that rainfall come. And that's, you just got to seize that moment. And if that moment doesn't come, then there's not much I can help you with. We're at the mercy of Mother Nature, and sometimes she doesn't work on our time schedule. Sorry about that, but it has. The weather's changed, and our weather's more violent, so to speak. So bigger, heavier snowfalls, or like now, none. Big, long, dry periods. It doesn't have to be in summertime, being wintertime as well. And so that whiplash weather is really playing in, and so that's how we got to hone in and utilize this the best we can. Yeah, I give them a hard time, but you got to realize too that we've caused a lot of this ourselves by this bare ground and heat rising and these heat domes. It disrupts that weather pattern, and what used to be very predictable is now not so predictable. And I remember my granddad talking in the 30s and the 50s about rains coming up and just splitting and going around them. Well, actually, it doesn't split and go around you. What happens is it evaporates. When that heat's rising, and you'll evaporate that water vapor before it even comes down. And it looks like it's going around you, and it's went right over you. And where it was going around was where the timber and the rivers and the creeks was, where the humidity was. And so now we're starting to understand that more. And that's why in our area we get this big, huge heat dome in the summer that moves around, clear up into here and back to the west and whatnot. And that's from a lot of bare ground and that radiant heat rising. And it just blocks everything off for us. So in their defense, I like to pick on them. It's more harder for them to predict because we've changed them dynamics quite a bit. But yeah, they're not so accurate anymore.
We don't use any tillage. How is the tractor seeded the tractor for roughness?
So we learned a long time ago. So we are on controlled traffic with our guidance. We plant the same way. We harvest the same way. We do everything the same way. So if I do cause an indention at the combine or sprayer or whatever, it's the way I'm going. So I don't have to go across them. I go with them. And them don't bother me. Now we have feral pigs that come in and they don't till very even and they don't hair behind themselves. And so we have to go in and do some maintenance when we have feral pig issues and smooth that up. And we'll do a little of that with skid steer, a lot of times in the bucket. We tried harrowing a few times, but if you got a lot of residue on the ground, you're just going to load and dump and make a mess. And so we have to do some maintenance. But once we decided, instead of trying to go 30-degree angle or 40-degree angle, it's like control it. So we plant in the same tracks, we spray in the same tracks, and if we make an indention, we're going with it. It doesn't bother us. We've talked about that. The problem with and I could, and there's big demand for that. But if you're trying to trap them and really eliminate them, if you get after them, if they're out during the day and you shoot into them, yeah, you'll kill 2, 3, 4, 5. But if there's 40, then you won't see them other 35 again in the daytime. And then they'll come in the night, and you'll go down there and you'll figure out they're coming in at 10 o'clock. You can take a spotlight down there and you can kill 2 or 3 more, or 1 or 2, and then you won't see them 30 at 10 o'clock again. They may be 2 o'clock. It may be 5 o'clock in the morning. They're extremely sharp. And if you're doing any of that, you can't trap then because they're on high alert. And the thing about trapping is we set big traps up where we can catch 40, 50 at a time. If we slam a gate and there's a pig outside the gate, you will never, ever catch that pig in another trap. And so we use a lot of cameras and stuff, and if we can't get them all in the pen, we don't trip the gate anymore because we cannot capture them, and then they breed the next litter smarter. And it's a big issue, and aphis has helped us. They fly a lot. I had to quit growing corn because it is devastating, and grain sorghum on the river. I just can't do it. We're going to try to fence them out and see if we can do that where we're trying to grow some grains. It's a plague that you don't want, I'll just tell you. There is a lot of opportunities in hunting other things, because as we build cover crops, our quail and our turkey numbers are up, our deer, we have elk coming in now, big population of elk in the river, so they have some hunts for that as well. So we're looking at that. It's just dealing with the public and setting liability insurance up and getting things set, but it's another stream of revenue. Surely I haven't answered everybody's question. Yeah.
How many species would you plant on a cover crop if you're in a drier situation, sunflower,
I wouldn't start at 15. I would start at 3 to 7. And I'd really look, we talked about this out in the hallway earlier. You really want to look at water use efficiency in these dry areas. So you don't want to plant a grazing corn that's going to use a lot of water. You want to use a millets. Millets are really water efficient. Guar is very water efficient. Legume. You really want to look on that list of cover crops as you're selecting. And like I said yesterday, it's 2 to 3 benefits for each seed I'm going to plant. So one of the benefits in that would be water use efficiency or leaf size. If I'm going to plant thinner population in a dry area of water use efficiency, I want a sunflower that has a huge leaf on it so I can close that canopy up. Sunflowers are going to use less water. It's going to have a big flower on it for beneficials and honeybees and different things. And so that's how I would start building that mix and think about it's not going to rain again. If I can get it up, how's this going to survive? It's going to survive on little water. And that's one thing I like about sesame, because if I can get sesame up, if I got any water in the profile at all, I can grow something. It'll make 500-600 pounds on literally a teaspoon of water because it's a desert plant. And so it's very, very, very efficient on water. So that's critical. And I would start with a lighter mix just so you can start understanding plants and understanding benefits of them plants and try to stack them benefits to your advantage. If you have issues in other crops with aphids and worms and different things, you want beneficials coming in. So you want multiple colors of flowers and aromas. They work off aroma and ultraviolet light. And so that difference in color is extremely important. So, like I said, that first mix, I think was probably 5 or 7, and then I done that a year or so, and then I went to a 9. I was a little more confident, and then we'll try something else, try this, and then I wound up at 15, 16. I planted 25, I planted as many as 40 different things. And it's like every other thing, there's a return on investment curve there, and you got to watch that seed cost, and there's still benefits. The more diversity you put in, the least likely a failure, because not every seed is going to grow prolific in every area of the field. It's just not going to do it. I mean, difference in soils, clay, sands, sandy loams, whatever, is going to grow differently. But also, if you get to that high number up there, the return on investment gets trimmer. And so I finally figured out kind of where I'm at is about a 15 to 20 way summer mix for us. Cool seasons, you're more limited, depends on what you're going to do. If you're going to graze anything in the cool season, you're almost wasting your dollars on legumes, because if you graze a legume, it's not going to fix nitrogen because it's trying to grow. You want a legume to work on its own. You're not going to get it to graze. So if I'm going to graze something, I'll limit what I'm going to spend on legumes, because it's just the return's not going to be there. But if I'm not going to graze, maybe I throw 2 or 3 legumes in, especially if I'm going to grow a cash crop in the spring and summer that I need a lot of nitrogen. I can build it that way. So it's stacking goals, understanding goals and targets of what you want the cover crop to work for you. I mean, you can't just plant a cover crop just to plant a cover crop. You need to plant a cover crop like a cash crop and have in mind what it's going to do for you and how it's going to make you money. Is it going to fix your infiltration for your next cash crop? Is it going to attract beneficials and be a pollinator spot to help an adjoining crop next door? Is it going to create nitrogen? Or are you just going to need the biomass? Lots of things to think about as you're trying to do that. And like I said, try to stack your benefits. And if you can do that, then things will really go to working. And I didn't know all that to start with, and I'm still learning a lot about that. We talked about how I selected species for flowers and how I run across that. And it's just talking to entomologists and understanding how pests work and what attracts them and what doesn't attract them. You can keep the Brix level higher. They can't digest the sugars, aphids and worms and stuff, and they just won't come. If they come, it's going to kill them. And so just lots to learn in this, but you just got to start and be observant and do meetings like this and try to learn. Yes?
Would you recommend any kind of area to look, like a compendium of a list of all the seeds and like 5 or 6 or 12 we've been talking about, say we need to chart, or we just need to go through all the process, just lots of
Well, it's everywhere right there. A great resource. They got the online calculator, and you don't have to buy a seed from them to use the calculator. And the calculator it calculates everything. It'll calculate seed cost, carbon and nitrogen ratio, how much nitrogen you want to fix, if you want phosphorus, and so you can build that online. And if you're spending too much money, you can go back and say, well, that seed costs 30 cents a pound, this seed costs 15 cents a pound. I'll take a couple out here, add 3 or 4 here, and all at once, here comes your cost back down. And just sit there of an evening sometime and go online. And there's other seed companies that have really good websites and as well that you can go and look at species and benefits. They're just one that's really done a good job, but there's others that's doing great jobs too. Yep. You mean overwintering?
Well, them becoming a weed rather than.
Right, right.
You have cash crops still come from.
Sure. There's some things that you don't want. you don't want to plant a hairy vetch that's a hard seed. If you know, because some of that's not going to come up and will come up later, that will affect another cash crop. You just kind of got to start as you're building these mixes, think about the future here. Like I said, rye. If you're in wheat country or other countries and you don't want rye getting away, until you learn to manage the system a little better, maybe that's not a crop, but use triticale. Triticale doesn't scatter like rye does. Yeah, it is. So maybe an oat or a barley. I mean, we got to get along with our neighbors, and they got to understand too. And so it's kind of a learning curve. I've had to look, hard and how to manage, because I use a lot of hairy vetch to start with, and I still do. But I use it in something that I know I'm going to have 2 or 3 years to control it. Now, it's easy to kill if I want to take it out, but it's reoccurring if you let it go to seed. Of course, the way to get out of that is just terminate it before it goes to seed in the spring, and that really works well. And then you don't have to worry about it, but them hard seed are going to escape, and they'll be back. And so you kind of got to watch and think about that. So there is some of that, and some of these things overwintering that we used not to see. We've had a little warmer winter sometimes, but that's the reason I plan out the best I can a year or two in advance. But I still am the seed man's worst nightmare, because when I do get to water, I may change my plans overnight and want to plant something that'll fit the window instead of staying with my plan. And so there's a lot of that goes on now as well, especially if I'm on a relay or companion. I have sold triticale seeds. I really like it for weed suppression. And we do have to have hay. We're cattlemen, and so we do put up quite a bit of hay. I really like, in the spring now, I use a barley, spring triticale, spring barley, spring oats, spring pea, about 6, 7 different things, 8, to make a really good hay. The analysis come back the last 2 years that I didn't need to feed any protein with that hay. It was so good. And so I do a lot of that. Anything that'll make some money. I got a combine, and if there's a market somewhere, I'm a-looking. That was the biggest hurdle for us, was getting out of the box of just thinking that we could only raise wheat in our country, and nobody grows soybeans. And that's the reason I kind of started soybeans, because soybeans was a pretty good price. I still got 4 binfuls of beans at home, which right now look really smart. And if I get home and get some shipped and sold, I'll be really smart. And if they go down in the next few days, I'll look like an idiot. So, but these non-GMOs, like 17.25 yesterday is what they offered me. It's a pretty good price for 40 bushel beans. Yeah, that's what my marketer said, so I'm thinking 17, 18 bucks sounds pretty good.
About the seed mix, how much consideration about the size of the seed? Like, sometimes, big seed versus the small seed, they're really, if you put too big, it might not even come out.
So if you plant them all together, they work in synergy, and the small seeds will come up. They told me sesame wouldn't come up 1.5 inches deep. Don't plant it 1/2 inch deep, 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch deep. Well, it will not work in our area, because the surface will dry out too quick. It will come up if you got the soil structure and you dry slow. And the same way with these multiple species, you can plant a clover or a small seed with a pea or a bean, and they'll come up right together. It's amazing what they'll do together. But if you plant that small seed that deep by itself with no soil structure, it's done.
So the big seeds, it opens up, and then the small seeds.
They come up just like in Mother Nature. So it's and they a lot of places told me when I started mixing these hay mixes together that you never get that to dry out, because some would be immature and some would be too mature. it's really amazing that when you plant that and that's growing, how they all at once get very, very close together. It's amazing what they can do, and that time difference changes. There'll still be a little bit of immaturity and a little bit, but not much. Not near like if you looked at the statistics and said, well, these oats are going to be shelled out before this, or this pea's going to be too far along, or the trit's not going to be headed. It's not that way. It's really amazing how they work together in a system. Right, right. So it's it's just a learning curve. Brendan Rocky in Center Colorado plants peas with these potatoes, 6 inches deep. When Brendan told me he's going to do that the first time, I said, "You think a pea will come up 6 inches deep?" He said, "Well, I think so, because I think they'll follow the potato." And sure enough, I mean, them things come up amazing. And so then it's like, well, there's no boundary then what we can try. And now, when we're planting sesame, we plant it mono because it's food grade. And so then my hired hand hates me at about 3.5, 4 mile an hour as fast as we plant. But we can plant 1.5 inches deep with that structure and don't put too much pressure on everything, and it'll come right up. But you got to have that structure. If I'd done that the first 2 or 3 or 4 years in this system, it would not have worked. You got to have that porous soil structure for that to work, and that airflow. How are we doing on time? All right. Well, I really appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Good luck. I hope it goes to raining and snowing, and I wish y'all all the very best. Thank you. You want to do this? I'm just going to eject that.
Yep.
You know which one I'm in?